Okay, so today we are continuing with uh, right. We are continuing with the comprehension, and we're moving on to question 2. So since you already read the text earlier, right, let's take a look at the question. So these are all writer's meaning and effect questions or writer's craft questions, and they're going to ask you why did the writer use this particular phrasing or this particular word instead of another one. And we've come across these in the specimen paper. What does the writer mean to tell us, or what impression or are they trying to create? And they're pretty much implicit questions, right? So you won't find the answer directly, right? So it's something you have to sort of untangle in your mind and then come up with a response. It is worth only 9 marks, that is 9 out of 25. So it is obviously decent weightage. Uh, some are straightforward, can be easily attempted, others a bit more challenging. Overall, if you just get a hang of it, to be honest, you get into that frame of mind and you do have a certain level of, you know, uh, your mind is adjusted with English and its, expression and personality. It's not that challenging. I'm not saying it's not challenging, it's not that challenging. Okay, so question 2a. Read the extract from the text. You could live 1,000 lifetimes and not even begin to scratch the surface of paddling all the possibilities. And this phrase is taken from lines 35 and 36. What does the writer want to suggest to us about how he feels about paddling in northern Canada? Right, so what does this phrase, this line, in fact, tell us about his feeling about paddling in northern Canada? So we can go to the text, that's lines 35 and 36. So that's paragraph 7, right? The end of paragraph 7. So there you have it. You can read the paragraph, the earlier part, to get an idea, more of an idea of the context, and then come up with a response and let me know. All right. Do we have a response? Haram says there are many natural resources of water. Resources. Uh, Haram, what do you mean by resources? I'm just trying to understand. Right, Baka, we are doing question 2 of the comprehension that we started. This is June 2024, paper 1, variant 1, about the northern Atlantic coast and the guy in his canoe and the cold and the wind and everything. And this is question 2A that we're just attempting right now. Okay, so yes, Haram. What
Like there are many different ways to through which water can be extract and
that water
can
can
be
be?
used. Water can be used and
Is the text talking about using water really?
no.
Then why would you say that? See,
Like there are many
there are many routes, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so routes means pathways or passages or uh, like ways that you could travel. Okay. All right. Afin says he sees it as a challenge. Okay, so that response would work. It is a valid response. Amarza, do you have anything?
Vastness of the region he was exploring.
It tells us about the vastness of the region he was exploring. Hmm. Possibly, possibly. Uh, and Mirza, do you have any response? Okay, right. So, right, when he talks about traveling the routes, and he mentions that it would take 1,000 lifetimes to even scratch the surface of all the possibilities. Right, the fact that he's using the word possibility sort of hints towards uh, you know it's a positive feeling, right? He's looking at it positively. So suggested answers are that he's either excited by the thought of all those different pathways that he could take. uh, he does see it as a challenge, as Afin suggested. Amarza, you said the vast region. Like what is the wording you used?
Vastness,
Vastness of
the region.
the region. So one of the suggested responses are that he feels there are endless journeys. So perhaps it could tie in because the guidance mentions that any appropriate alternative feeling that provides a positive on a positive note, like a positive feeling, will be rewarded, right? So any appropriate, any other. So possibly that would tie in with the endless journeys that are possible, and right, you might get your 1 mark. And just saying that he'd enjoy it, right? That's also a possibility. That's also a suggested answer. Okay, question 2B then. Just right, you have to think about it in context to what's being talked about in the text, but don't overthink it. Right, I've had students overthinking it and then sort of really moving, like missing the point because of that. Okay, now explain why the writer uses the phrase most efficient rather than the word efficient in the expression to devise the most efficient route I could. Right, this is similar to why the writer used the word stronger instead of strong in that nameless passage, right? When Mo was climbing the tree and everything. So, why does the writer use the phrase most efficient rather than just saying efficient? So, that's line 37. And so, that is, I believe, the beginning of paragraph 8. So, here we are. And so, you can read on paragraph 8 and get a sense of what's going on and come up with a response. Let me know when you have one. All right, do we have a response? All right, Afin says to emphasize on choosing the best route. Okay, that works, yes. Anyone else? What does the writer say, mean to say when they're saying most efficient?
Like that was one of the best route ways he could take.
One of the best routes, so, okay, you're saying that as well. One of the best routes, fine, that is correct. Amarza, Bakar, to signify the way he picked was the best. Same. Okay, fine. So you're all on the same page with this one. And it's all correct, right? So the suggestion is the best or safest or simplest or quickest route, right? So any of those. There is another suggestion which kind of goes like it's the, looking at it another way, and it suggests that saying most efficient rather than efficient means to say that none of them were actually efficient, none of them were actually good, right? But between choosing the least worse of the options, right? So that's kind of another way of looking at it. But again, as I mentioned, right, so if a student, and what examiners tend to do is, the reason they've included this other take on it uh, is probably because a number of candidates may have thought of it this way and given a response. And so when they come across these kind of responses with a good number of candidates, even though the initial mark scheme that the examiners get may not have had it as a possible answer, because so many candidates gave it and they thought over it and they're like, kind of makes sense perhaps. And so they include it. That doesn't mean that, if the majority of the, like a good percentage of candidates write the wrong answer, and then so they'll include the wrong answer as, being a valid answer just because so many students are doing it. But if it's an alternative that works, but not something that perhaps the examiner thought of, then they'd include it. They would allow it, right? So the mark scheme is actually adjusted during corrections based on examiner response, especially in examinations such as these, where responses can tend to be open-ended, right? So there's not necessarily a very fixed, definite response to a question. Okay, next question. C. What two impressions does the writer want to convey to the reader in the sentence? Looking at what at first glance appeared to be an incomprehensible labyrinth. You see, the term labyrinth is being repeated. We got that in the specimen. I think it came across somewhere. We came across it somewhere earlier as well. Perhaps like somewhere, I guess, or maybe I came across it in class. Not sure. Uh, and we have it over here again, right? A puzzle of lakes and ponds. I realized it could be deliciously challenging not to confuse one bay or inlet for any of the thousands of others. Now, the reason I highlighted labyrinth is because once you get familiarized, or you have a taste of these, like this kind of usage of vocabulary. Uh, any language is based on words, right? So you know they are repeated, right, in different expressions. So that is how you strengthen your proficiency in the language. Okay, anyway, coming back. So these are the lines, that's 38 to 40. So that's still paragraph 8, I believe. And just to clarify once again what impression means. So impression is, what image or what scene does the writer want to create in the reader's mind? So it's obviously using words because it's written. Even if it's spoken, it's still using words. But it's more about the picture, how the reader pictures that scene in their mind based on the way the writer has explained it. So what two impressions? So what kind of scene do you imagine when you read these three lines, or two and a half lines if you're being particular, and then write about that? What does the writer want to convey to the reader based on these lines? So again, for context, here we are, paragraph 8. That's lines 38 to 40. Here, right? So give it some thought and let me know. All right. Do we have a response? Mirza says the route was confusing or challenging because lots of lakes and ponds. You have an extra U in there. You mean ponds. And Amarza says the complexity of the region and how hard it can be to navigate. Right. So they're highlighting. So you're saying they're trying to highlight the challenging or confusing nature or the complexity. And Afin is suggesting that the maps were difficult to understand. Okay. Yes, Haram, I believe you were trying to suggest
Yeah.
add something. Yes.
That it was difficult to navigate them and that it was quite complicated.
It was difficult and complicated. So this is worth 2 marks. And so there are four possible suggestions. Difficulty is one of them. Complication is another. So, right, all of you who suggested complexity or complication, being complicated, uh, will get marks. Then what they suggest is, because he says an incomprehensible means you can't, make them out, right? Comprehend means to understand. And so incomprehensible means cannot understand, which lake and which pond is going where, and how they're mixing up, and one leading to the other. And so I realized it could be deliciously challenging. Now here they're using the word deliciously again, right? Like I said, the image that you're getting, it's you have to look at the words nonetheless, right? You have to look at the words nonetheless, because that's what it's about. It's about reading. So he doesn't say it's challenging, he or she, whomever the writer is, right? uh, it said deliciously challenging means they're again looking at it positively. So, right, another impression could be the writer's excitement, right? Or they take it on as a challenge, right? They're happy about it, perhaps, right? They're excited, and they're looking for adventure. And then they say not to confuse one bay or inlet for any of the thousands of others. And so what that would suggest perhaps is that it could be easy to confuse them and then get lost, right? So I feel not so much about the map being difficult to read, but about the, again, as the text mentions, the complexity of the routes themselves, sorry. All right. Any, like, is that clear? Right? Any questions or anything about this particular one? No? All right, let's move on. All right, second last question. Read the sentence from the text. Roaring, swirling, foaming, water pulling back and forth on my boots, made holding onto the canoe while struggling to maintain my balance almost impossible. What effect does the writer want to suggest about the water by using the words roaring, swirling, foaming? Now, as you can see over here, they're very much directly referencing the words, right? It's not so much about, I mean, you have to sort of think about it in terms like what's happening. So there is like that image in the reader's mind part, but more focus is okay, what does this word over here tell me about what's happening in that scene? So the focus is on what does this word tell me about what's happening in the scene? Why this word? So what does roaring tell me about the water? What does swirling tell me about the water? What does foaming tell me about the water and what's happening to the writer? Okay, so it's worth 2 marks. And so I should think about what's going on in that scene and then let me know when you have a response. Right? Just there can be more than one response, right? There are actually multiple suggested. Right? So go ahead, think about it. It's not like, there are 3 words, so there might be just 3. You only need 2, so even if you focus on any 2 of those 3 which make sense to you, you'll still get your marks. But I'm just telling you there's more than, more than that suggested. So let me know when you have ideas about it. Right, we have some responses coming in. Haran says the water is moving violently and making a lot of noise. So that's, okay, that's two things. The water was fast flowing and with current. Okay. The water is powerful and wild. Okay. You are responding to a metaphorical question with a metaphorical answer, right? That might work. Although, as I mentioned, because it's an exam, uh, I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but from a teacher's perspective, right, at the end of the day, since it's an exam and you want to score marks, try to be straightforward in your answers, right? Kind of the safe way to score marks. Mirza is asking, is saying it's talking about the sound of the water for roaring. So yes, roaring does uh, hint towards the sound it's making, right? It is, the questions were 2 marks, so you need 2 points. However, okay, so we have our responses now. Let's see what the examiner is looking for. So it they say the noise is loud, okay, or threatening perhaps. So loud works. Uh, it's dangerous or violent. So who suggested violent? Uh, yeah, Haran, right? So you get your 2 marks. Uh, and right, they also say it's kind of like an animal or a beast, right? Now, how do they get this idea of that's like an animal? Because they've used the word roaring. And so normally when you hear the word roar, the first thing that comes to mind is most likely an animal, maybe like a lion or something, right? And so the kind of, again, that is the metaphorical use over here. So again, we understand that in part two, they're asking questions about the usage of words, and then obviously figurative language or metaphorical use is there, right? And figuring out what they're actually, hinting towards. So because the word roaring is used, is sort of linking it to an animal or a beast or danger, the sense of danger of being attacked, but violent also works. Okay, it's constantly in motion, it's relentless. Then they're talking about it being very strong or energy, or there's being a lot of energy or power. It's going in every direction. So the energy and the constant motion is obviously the swirling, right? The power may be from also the swirling and the roaring combined. Uh, going in every so yeah, going in every direction. Constant motion is swirling and foaming. So the only thing we have for foaming is bubbling. Another thing we have is, along with the going in every direction, is chaotic. So powerful, yes. Wild, actually, yes. Right. So, like I said, right, it's not necessarily wrong. I'm just talking about taking the safer route. Okay, so most of you got your marks out of this, so that is right. Positive sign for me, right? You guys are getting a hang of this. Last question, 3 marks. Now, how does this work? Identify one example of how the writer uses language effectively to convey his feelings as the morning haze clears. Right? The extract is given here. You can read the extract. You don't really need to go to the passage for this one because they've given all the lines here. If you want to, you can. Right? Now, what do you need to do? Explain the impression the writer creates in the examples. Again, it's impression. It is how that particular word and what that word means and the context of the word creates an image of in your mind as to what's going on. And they're asking about his feeling. Even though they're saying feelings, right? Something such as gray cliffs, for example, oldest time, gray cliffs of rock, oldest time, and you could sort of link that to a feeling. So what you need to do is, it's worth 3 marks. There are multiple examples that, multiple parts of the text, phrases from the text that can be picked as an example. You just need to pick one, right? So whatever you pick, write it over here. So that's 1 mark. And then 2 marks for for the explanation, right? So how what is the impression, and how does that link to the writer's feeling? So 2 marks. So you need 2 points of explanation for the example that you've picked. Okay. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about this, and then when you have a response, let me know, and then we can talk about it. We have 2 responses. I'm waiting for 2 more. All right, we have 3 responses now. Bakr, do you have a response? Okay, now before carrying on, 2 things I want to go over. Firstly, for the previous question, right? So the roaring, swirling, foaming. Afin, your response was the water was fast flowing with current. So I just want to go back on that and clarify something. Unfortunately, the marking scheme clearly says that if the student responds by saying that uh, the water was fast, or talks about the speed of the water, then it would not be credited. So since you talked about fast flowing, then you won't get a mark for that only, right? You mentioned currents, so perhaps that would fit into one of the maybe about the energy, or maybe about the motion or something, right? So you probably, like, possibly get 1 mark, but not the mark for the fast flowing part. Okay, now as for this question, right, the guidance given, the way you're supposed to approach this, right, is that the explanation you give for your chosen example should go beyond the literal and the narrative. What does that mean? That if you're just explaining, for example, it says vivid green hills and you say there's a lot of greenery, that's just the literal. That's basically you're just sort of rephrasing and saying the same thing. Oh, it's green, so there was greenery, there are plants, right? That's not what they're looking for. So if that's the kind of explanation you're going to offer, then you won't be able to score, right, in for your explanation. You'd get a mark for your example, yes, but not the explanation. So what they're looking for is, right, an understanding of the impact of particular words, right, or techniques in which, like, how the words have been used in combination, and more of a metaphorical approach, most likely. uh, Explanation should be in the candidate's own words rather than repeating uh, the text itself, right? So if you've chosen an example that has the word ancient in it, right, then you do not repeat. In fact, it's not ancient. Ancient, I believe, is used over here, right? So, for example, the word scattered is over here. So you don't use that same word as the explanation because you're just repeating it. So, right, do not use this words of the text in your explanation, basically, right? You have to rephrase it. So using synonyms. Now let's take a look at your responses. Amariza says, scroll up. Yeah. Is clear to reveal a fairy tale landscape. Now, first of all, is that a valid response? It is. Yes, right? So reveal a fairy tale landscape. Now, what do you have to say about that? It uses metaphor to compare the landscape's greenery and beauty to a fairy tale landscape. Okay. Now again, right? So you've done exactly what the requirement said not to do, right? And so we're learning over here. You've explained it. You explained fairy tale landscape by using fairy tale landscape, right? Which is not what the question wants. So how could you rephrase fairy tale landscape, right? You said beauty, which is good. Okay, so that works. Uh, you've talked about greenery, so that would perhaps work as well. Now, fairy tale. What are fairy tales? Are fairy tales real? No. right? What do fairy tales? So you could say that they're imaginary or fictional, right? And a fictional setting, right? A fictional landscape. Uh, what else does a fairy tale sort of normally have, right? It has magic, right? So you could say it's and what genre does it belong to? It belongs to fantasy, right? So you could talk about its beauty, right? It's like a fantasy world. You put the two words together, fairy tale landscape, and it's like picturesque. It's magical. It's enchanting. It's beautiful, right? And so doing that. So because you mentioned beauty, you possibly get 1 mark. But for repeating fairy tale landscape, which is part of like it's the wording of the example itself, right? Doesn't work. Okay, Haram. Vivid green hills, jumbles of boulders beyond counting, scattered everywhere. Okay, so this is right. Uh, a possible example, yes. Now you suggested it explains there was a mountainous area with rocks and greenery everywhere. So again, I believe what right. I mean, you'd get a mark, I believe. Uh, what does this talk about? What are they mentioning over here? So they're talking about a lot of color and sound around because they're using the word vivid, right?
Like vibrant would be used.
Yes, right. They're also talking about sort of like a sensory overload. Like there was so much color and so much sound around that there was like a lot to take in. They do mention vegetation, but they say like brilliant, lush vegetation, right? So not just greenery, right? Not just greenery, but brilliant, lush. Why are they saying brilliant, lush? Because it says vivid, right? It's not just green, it's vivid green. Okay. Then they say, you said rocks everywhere. So they're saying there was like a vast number and random pattern of large rocks, not just rocks, right? Why is there like a large number? Because it says jumbles of boulders beyond counting, right? Beyond counting means there's a lot of them. And why is it saying random pattern? Because it says scattered, scattered about. Okay. So you need to go a bit beyond the apparent, right? It's not like you go way beyond and miss the target, but just go like if this is the first thing coming to your mind, okay, fine, how can I take this a bit further, just a bit further? All right. Afin, fairy tale landscape, so that's what you've chosen. Okay, again, uh, the land had a magical beauty, it seemed unrealistic, so I already gone over that one. And so, yes, you score your 2 points, I believe, for that. So good. And uh, Barker does not have a response, unfortunately. Right, Barker, did you find this question challenging? Right, is that why? So, right, if that is the case, then right, I hope that our explanation uh, is useful, right? It helped you to understand how to go about this, because obviously this this kind of question is something that you will definitely have with the text in your examination, right? This is, yeah, this is one of the core question types in the current pattern. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to put the mark scheme on screen so that we can see the rest of the possible options. Right, so you can see that. Let me just change it over here as well. Okay, so right, we've talked about, and another thing to note, right? So we've talked about reveal a fairy tale landscape. We've talked about that. We saw vivid green hills, jumbles of boulders, and little stream crashing. Now, thing over here is these are actually 3 different points that they've clumped up as one, right? So according to my understanding, if you write these as two different, they're going to count as one. Now, what do we do about that? Uh, we can't do anything about it because we don't know if the examiner is going to treat two what appear to be two separate points as a single point. We don't know that, right? So how do we play safe? Well, obviously pick. I mean, you just need to pick one example actually, right? Now, I was thinking of question H in like question one of the comprehension. We have to give three details and explain them, right? Like three details with the feelings and use your own words. So no. So since you in this one, since you have to pick any one example, it doesn't matter, right? So even if they've clumped three of them together, you just need to pick one. So even if you just picked the bolder part and explained it properly, then it works. Okay, what else do we have? We have towering great gray cliffs, right? Towering, so they're forming a barrier sort of, so they're forbidding, right? They're intimidating and massive. They're towering, great, so height, right? Perhaps a sense of awe, right? They're like a wall or a boundary around. Old as time, right? So a sense of infinity set against his own. Now, see, this one's tricky. So, again, my suggestion, playing it safe, pick an example that you feel confident you'll be able to explain with relative ease, right? Unless you are sort of aiming for a distinction, right? Perhaps it matters for, if that is your aim. Otherwise, if it's just scoring a good grade, and that depends just on your raw marks, pick an example that you can comfortably explain, right? That's it. Okay, so ancient crumbling castle ruins. So, right, ancient, so legends, castle, adventure, ancient history, crumbling, right, decay, dinosaurs, so prehistoric, otherworldly, back in time, and then timeless world, eons older, and so you've got traveling back in time, separated from the modern world, right, untouched by humans. And you can see, so there are many examples you could have picked from. Okay, so with that we are actually done with the comprehension. Now for tomorrow's class, right, we'll take a look at the summary and the short response, and I might possibly give that to you as homework after taking a look at it. And I will also, I plan to, right? So I only have two submissions for the composition that I assigned to you last week. And so if the other two can submit it today, I'll take a look at it in class. I might not be able to take a look at all four of them, but right, as many as I can. So I'll take a look at your composition submissions and try and go over the summary and assign that as homework for right the next time. So right, please have your submit like turn in your composition work on Google Classroom, so we have something to do tomorrow. Any questions? Anything you'd like to ask or share, right, about English or the paper or the questions we did today? Right, if not, then yeah, we're done for the day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.